There is a conversation happening inside your mind right now. Nobody can hear it, nobody can see it. You don't have to speak a single word out loud. And yet, according to Neville Goddard, this private conversation may be one of the most important things you will ever learn to control. Because while you are busy watching the world around you, your mind is constantly rehearsing the world you expect to experience next. You talk to people who aren't there. You replay conversations that already happened. You imagine conversations that haven't happened yet. You explain yourself to people in your imagination. You defend yourself. You argue. You imagine someone apologizing. You imagine someone congratulating you. You imagine being rejected. You imagine being accepted. You imagine losing. You imagine winning. And most of the time, you don't even realize you're doing it. But what if these conversations aren't meaningless? What if the conversation you repeatedly have in private is revealing the identity you are unconsciously living from? And what if changing that conversation is one of the first steps toward changing your experience of life? That is the deeper question we are going to explore. Because Neville Goddard wasn't simply teaching people to repeat positive words. He was pointing towards something much more intimate, something happening every day, every hour, sometimes every minute. Your inner conversation. The world you see is not the only world you live in. You actually live in two worlds. There is the world everyone can see, your job, your home, your relationships, your bank account, your surroundings, your circumstances, your physical reality. And then there is another world, a world that nobody else can enter unless you allow them. The world inside your consciousness. In that world, you can have conversations with anyone. You can revisit any moment. You can create scenes that have never happened. You can hear words that nobody has spoken. You can experience emotions generated entirely by imagination. And this inner world often influences how you experience the outer world. Imagine someone sends you a short text. Okay, that's all. Two words, nothing else. One person reads it and thinks, they're probably busy. Another person immediately thinks, they're angry with me. Same message, completely different experience. Why? Because the message itself didn't contain the entire meaning. The mind supplied the rest. Your inner conversation interpreted reality. And this is where Neville's teaching becomes powerful. The conversation after the conversation. Have you ever had an argument with someone and then continued the argument hours later inside your head? The real conversation ended, but the imaginary conversation continued. You think, I should have said this. Why did they say that? Next time, I'm going to tell them. You replay it, you rewrite it, you imagine what they should have said, you imagine what you should have said, and suddenly the person isn't even there. But emotionally, you're still talking to them. This is important because your nervous system can respond to an imagined conversation as though it carries emotional significance. The physical conversation may have lasted 5 minutes, but your inner version can last 5 hours. Which one receives more of your attention? The 5 minute conversation or the 5 hour mental replay? Neville's warning about inner conversations. Neville Goddard placed significant emphasis on what he called inner conversations. The idea isn't that every random thought automatically creates a physical event. That would be an oversimplification. The deeper point is that repeated inner conversations reveal and reinforce the state from which you live. If you repeatedly imagine people disrespecting you, you are rehearsing an identity. If you repeatedly imagine being rejected, you are rehearsing an identity. If you repeatedly imagine yourself succeeding, being respected, being loved, being secure, you are rehearsing another identity. The question is not, did I have one negative thought today? The question is, what conversation do I keep returning to? Your mind is always rehearsing. Think about an actor preparing for a role. They don't simply read the script once, they rehearse again and again and again. Eventually, the words become natural, the movements become natural, the emotions become familiar. Your inner conversations work in a similar way. If you repeatedly tell yourself, I'm always behind, that becomes familiar. If you repeatedly tell yourself, nobody understands me, that becomes familiar. If you repeatedly tell yourself, everything is difficult, that becomes familiar. And once a belief becomes familiar, you stop questioning it, you simply live from it. The most dangerous conversation. The most dangerous conversation isn't necessarily the loudest one. It is the one you have become so accustomed to that you no longer notice it. Maybe it's, I knew this would happen. People always disappoint me. Ah, I can never get ahead. Things are always going wrong. I'm just unlucky. That's just how my life is. Notice the phrase, that's just how my life is. That sentence sounds harmless, but underneath it is an assumption. It turns a temporary experience into an identity. Instead of saying, this happened, uh, you begin saying, this is who I am, and that is a much more powerful statement. Event versus identity. An event can happen without becoming your identity. You can experience failure without becoming a failure. You can experience rejection without becoming rejected. You can experience financial difficulty without deciding that you are permanently destined for scarcity. You can experience a difficult relationship without concluding that you are incapable of being loved. The danger begins when the event becomes a story, and the story becomes an identity, and the identity becomes an expectation, and the expectation influences how you interpret the next event. That's how cycles are created. The loop. Imagine this. Something disappointing happens. You think, see, nothing ever works for me. That thought creates an emotional response. You feel discouraged. Because you're discouraged, you behave differently. You hesitate, you withdraw, you stop trying. Then another opportunity passes, and you say, see, I was right. Now the event becomes evidence. The evidence strengthens the assumption. The assumption strengthens the identity. The identity influences your future behavior, and the cycle continues. This is why changing your inner conversation matters. You are interrupting the cycle at its source, the question that changes everything. Tonight, instead of asking, why hasn't my reality changed? Ask yourself, what am I constantly saying about my reality? What do you say when nobody is listening? What do you say when something goes wrong? What do you say when someone doesn't respond? What do you say when you look at your circumstances? What do you say about yourself? And perhaps most importantly, what do you say about your future? Because your future is not only something you wait for, you are constantly preparing for it through your assumptions. The inner conversation about money. Let's take money as an example. Someone wants financial freedom, but every day their inner dialogue sounds like, everything is so expensive, I'll never have enough. Money disappears so quickly. I'm always struggling. Rich people are different from me. Now compare that with someone whose inner conversation is, I am becoming financially capable. I know how to create value. I can learn. I can make better decisions. I expect my financial life to improve. These aren't magic phrases. The point is the identity behind them. One person repeatedly rehearses helplessness, the other rehearses possibility. That difference changes how they think, how they act, what they notice, and what opportunities they recognize. The inner conversation about love. Now, consider relationships. Someone says, I want a healthy relationship. But privately, they think, everyone leaves. People can't be trusted. I'm always the second choice. Nobody really loves me. Then someone shows genuine interest. The person becomes suspicious. They look for evidence. They interpret neutral behavior negatively. They pull away. And eventually the relationship struggles. Then they say, see, I was right. The assumption created a filter. The filter influenced the experience. This doesn't mean you are responsible for every action another person takes. It means your inner state influences how you interpret, respond to, and participate in relationships. That's a much more useful understanding. The inner conversation about yourself. Now we reach the deepest level. What do you say about you? Do you say, I'm behind? I'm not attractive enough. I'm not intelligent enough. What? I'm too young. I'm not lucky. Uh, I'm not disciplined. I always mess things up. These statements are more than descriptions. Repeated often enough, they become identities. And identities influence behavior. If you believe you are incapable, you hesitate. If you believe you are worthy, you make different choices. If you believe you are respected, you tolerate different things. If you believe you are capable, you approach challenges differently. The inner conversation changes the person having the conversation. Neville's deeper idea, thinking from, not just thinking of. One of the most important distinctions in Neville's teaching is the difference between thinking of something and thinking from it. Thinking of success says, I want to be successful. Thinking from success asks, if I already were successful, how would I naturally think? Thinking of love says, I hope someone loves me. Thinking from love says, how would I experience myself if I already felt deeply loved? Thinking of security says, I need to feel safe. Thinking from security says, how would I make decisions if I already trusted myself? This is a profound shift. You stop mentally standing outside your desired life and begin imagining from within it the conversation you should practice. Imagine your desire has already been fulfilled. Now imagine talking to someone who knows it. Perhaps they say, I'm so happy for you. And you answer, thank you. I still can't believe how naturally everything came together. Or imagine someone asking, how are things going now? And you respond, honestly, I'm in such a different place now. Notice what happened. You didn't imagine the struggle. You imagined the conversation after the struggle. You imagined from the fulfilled state. That's the principle. Don't make it complicated. You don't need a 20-minute visualization. You don't need elaborate scenes. You don't need to force emotion. Sometimes one sentence is enough. Imagine someone you trust saying, "You really did it." And imagine yourself answering, "Yes, it's finally my normal life." Then stop. Let the feeling settle. The goal is not intensity. The goal is naturalness, the power of naturalness. Imagine having something you already own. Do you spend all day convincing yourself that you own it? No, you simply know. You don't constantly check. Is it still mine? You don't panic. Maybe it disappeared. Ownership is natural. Neville's teaching encourages you to cultivate that same sense of naturalness toward your desired state. Not desperate, not obsessed, not constantly checking, just, "This is becoming who I am." Part 1, closing. Tonight, pay attention, not to the world, to the conversation inside you. Notice what you say when you're alone. Notice what you say about people. Notice what you say about yourself. Notice what you say about your future, and don't judge yourself. Just observe. Because you cannot change a conversation you don't know you're having. The first step isn't forcing yourself to think positively. The first step is becoming conscious. And once you become conscious of the conversation, you can finally choose a different one. Because somewhere inside your mind, you have been rehearsing a life. The question is, what life have you been rehearsing? Music slowly fades. And in part 2, we are going deeper. Because there is one type of inner conversation that can keep you trapped in the same reality for years. The conversation about what already happened. And once you understand how Neville approached the past, you'll understand why changing your inner conversation isn't about pretending. It's about changing the state from which you live. We discovered something most people never stop to examine. There is a conversation happening inside your mind that nobody else can hear. And that conversation is not always about the future. Sometimes it is about the past, a conversation with someone who hurt you, a conversation with someone who rejected you, a conversation with someone who underestimated you, a conversation about a mistake you made years ago, a conversation about what should have happened, but didn't. And here is where the hidden problem begins. The event may be over, the person may be gone, the moment may be years behind you, but inside your imagination, you may still be living there. You may have physically moved forward while emotionally remaining in the same conversation. And Neville Goddard's teachings give us a fascinating way to understand this. Because if you continuously revisit an old experience from the same emotional state, you keep giving that old state life. The past doesn't have to control the present. Let's imagine something happened to you 5 years ago. Someone told you, "You're not good enough." At the time, it hurt. Maybe you believed them. Maybe you carried that sentence with you. 5 years later, you may not consciously remember it every day. But when an opportunity appears, something inside you says, "What if I'm not good enough?" You think you're reacting to the opportunity, but perhaps you're reacting to an old conversation. The past is speaking through the present. This is how old assumptions survive. They don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they hide inside ordinary thoughts, the conversation that never ended. Think about someone who rejected you. Maybe they said, "I don't see a future with you." The conversation ended, but perhaps you continued it internally. You imagine them coming back. You imagine proving them wrong. You imagine them realizing your value. You imagine what you should have said. You imagine them regretting their decision. And every time you replay the scene, you emotionally return to the same identity, the identity of the person who was rejected, even if your conscious mind says, I'm over it. Your inner conversation may be saying something else. This is why revision matters. Neville Goddard taught a practice known as revision. The basic idea is simple. At the end of the day, mentally revisit events that did not happen the way you wanted and imagine them differently, not because you are denying history, not because you are pretending the physical event never occurred, but because you are changing your relationship with the experience. Instead of repeatedly rehearsing, they rejected me. Uh, you might imagine they valued me. They, instead of I failed, you imagine I handled it successfully. Instead of they ignored me, you imagine they listened and understood me. You are creating a different internal record, and that changes the state you carry forward. Why revision is not just positive thinking. This distinction matters. Positive thinking might say, everything is wonderful, but revision asks you to go deeper. It asks, what would I have preferred to experience? Then you mentally enter that experience. You hear different words, you see a different reaction, you feel a different ending. The purpose is not to argue with reality. The purpose is to stop allowing the old interpretation to dominate your consciousness. The emotional memory. Your mind doesn't store every experience as a neutral photograph. Experiences carry meaning. Someone says something, you interpret it. The interpretation creates emotion. The emotion becomes associated with the memory. Later, something similar happens, and the old emotion returns. You may not even remember the original event, but the pattern remains. This is why changing the inner conversation can be so powerful. You aren't merely changing words, you are changing the meaning attached to the words. The story you keep telling. Everyone has a story. Maybe your story is, I have always struggled. Maybe people always disappoint me. Maybe I never get what I want. Maybe my relationships never work. Maybe I always have to work twice as hard. These statements sound like observations, but repeated enough, they become declarations, and eventually you stop saying, this happened to me. You start saying, this is who I am. That is the moment a story becomes an identity. Stop saying, I've always been this way. One of the most limiting sentences you can say is, I've always been this way, because it turns your history into destiny. Maybe you've always been shy. Maybe you've always struggled with money. Maybe you've always doubted yourself. Maybe you've always expected rejection, but always is a dangerous word. It suggests the future is required to repeat the past. Neville's philosophy challenges exactly this assumption. The past can explain how you arrived here, but it does not have to determine where you go next, the moment you change the story. Imagine someone who has spent 10 years believing, I'm not confident. Then one day they decide, that's no longer my identity. At first, it feels unnatural. Their mind produces old evidence. But remember when you failed. Remember when you embarrassed yourself? Ah, remember what they said? The old identity has an entire archive. But the new identity doesn't need to argue with the archive. It simply needs to stop using it as a definition. Your memory can become wisdom instead of a prison. Your past can serve you. A difficult experience can teach you. A mistake can make you wiser. A rejection can reveal you what you truly want. A failure can show you what needs to change. The goal isn't to erase the past. The goal is to stop living from it. There is a difference between remembering what happened and expecting it to happen again. You can remember without rehearsing the inner conversation after failure. Imagine you applied for something and didn't get it. The external event is simple. You weren't selected. But what happens next? One person says, I wasn't selected this time. I'll learn and try again. Another says, of course, I never get opportunities. The event is identical. The conversation creates two different futures. The first person maintains possibility. The second person converts one event into an identity. And once identity changes, behavior changes, expectations change, attention changes. Opportunities that once seemed invisible may become visible. What are you repeating about your past? Take a moment. Think about the area of your life that frustrates you most. Now listen to your internal explanation. What do you say? This always happens. They always do this. I've never been lucky. I knew this would happen. This is just my life. Notice the repetition, because repeated explanations are often hidden assumptions, the person you keep talking about. Here's another powerful exercise. Think about someone who triggers you. Maybe an ex, maybe a family member, maybe a former friend, maybe a boss, maybe someone who hurt you. Now ask, who are they in my imagination? Do you constantly imagine them disrespecting you, ignoring you, judging you, rejecting you? Or do you imagine them respecting you, understanding you, supporting you, communicating peacefully? This matters because your imagined relationship with someone affects the state you occupy when you think about them. Everyone is not literally under your control. This point is important. Neville's teaching should not be interpreted as meaning you control every human being like a puppet. Other people have their own experiences, choices, and circumstances. The practical value of the teaching is to examine your own state. How do you expect people to treat you? How do you interpret their behavior? What role do you repeatedly assign yourself in relationships? Victim, rejected person, undervalued person, or someone who is respected and secure? Change your inner role, and your participation in relationships can change dramatically. The conversation before the conversation. Here's where things become even more interesting. Your inner conversation often happens before an external conversation. Imagine you're about to ask someone for an opportunity. Before you speak, you imagine they're going to say no. They're probably going to judge me. I'm going to embarrass myself. You've already had the conversation internally. And when the actual conversation happens, you may behave differently because of the state you entered with. Your voice changes. Your confidence changes. Your body language changes. Your expectations change. The inner conversation prepared the outer one. The same thing happens with success. Imagine someone receives a major opportunity. Instead of thinking, what if I fail? They think, they chose me because I'm capable. Now they approach the opportunity differently. They prepare differently. They communicate differently. They make decisions differently. Again, the inner conversation is influencing the person, and the person influences the outcome. Your future self is listening. Here's a powerful way to think about this. Imagine that every conversation you have with yourself is a rehearsal for the person you're becoming. If you constantly rehearse, I'm helpless, you strengthen helplessness. If you rehearse, I can handle difficult situations, you strengthen resilience. If you rehearse, I am always rejected, you strengthen rejection as part of your identity. If you rehearse, I am worthy of healthy relationships, or you strengthen a different identity. Your future self is being built through repeated assumptions. The nightly reset. This is why the end of the day can become powerful. Before you sleep, don't spend 20 minutes reviewing everything that went wrong. Instead, ask, what conversation do I want to carry into tomorrow? If someone disappointed you, revise the interaction. If you made a mistake, imagine yourself handling it successfully. If something embarrassed you, see yourself responding with confidence. If you felt rejected, imagine yourself feeling valued. Then let the day end. You don't need to carry every conversation into tomorrow, the inner conversation you want to wake up with. Imagine going to sleep after telling yourself, tomorrow is going to be difficult. Your mind enters sleep carrying expectation. Now imagine instead, tomorrow I move through life with confidence. I am capable. I am supported. I handle things calmly. The point isn't magical words. The point is the state you are entering sleep with. Your final mental atmosphere matters. Don't turn this into another form of anxiety. There is a trap here. You might hear this teaching and think, oh no, I had a negative thought. Did I just create something terrible? No, that is not the point. You are human. Thoughts arise, emotions arise, bad days happen. You don't need to monitor every thought like a security guard. The real focus is repeated identification. What do you continually return to? What story do you repeatedly reinforce? What assumption feels like home? That is what deserves your attention. You are allowed to change your mind. This may be one of the most liberating ideas in Neville's philosophy. You can change your mind, you can change your assumption, you can change the meaning of an experience, you can change the story. Decide, that is not who I am anymore. You don't need permission. You don't need everyone from your past to agree. You don't need your circumstances to approve. The decision begins internally. The old conversation will try to return. And when it does, don't panic. Your old mental habits may return because they have been practiced. You might suddenly hear, nothing has changed. Answer differently. I'm not returning to that story. You might hear, what if it fails? Answer, I'll handle whatever happens. I no longer assume failure. Huh? You might hear, nobody values me. Answer, I no longer define myself that way. This isn't arguing with yourself. It is choosing which voice receives authority. The power of a new inner voice. Eventually, the new conversation becomes easier. At first, you consciously choose it. Later, it becomes automatic. Something goes wrong. And you naturally think, I'll figure this out. Someone criticizes you. And you naturally think, their opinion doesn't define me. An opportunity appears, and you naturally think, I'm ready. That is when the transformation becomes real, not when you can repeat an affirmation, but when your automatic inner response begins changing. Part 2, the final realization. Your past doesn't need to disappear. Your memories don't need to be perfect. You don't need to pretend nothing painful happened. You simply need to stop using the past as evidence of what must happen next. Because every time you say, "This always happens to me," you are extending the old story. Every time you say, "People are always like this," you are rehearsing an expectation. Every time you say, "I'll never change," you are turning a belief into an identity. But you can interrupt the pattern. You can say, "That was then. This is the state I choose now," and then live from that choice. Part 2, closing. Tonight, remember one thing: the past can speak, but you don't have to answer. The old story can call, but you don't have to pick up. The memory can appear, but you don't have to enter it. You can observe it, you can revise it, you can release the identity attached to it, and then you can choose a new conversation, because the future isn't asking you to become perfect. It is asking you to stop repeatedly rehearsing the person you no longer want to be. Music rises slowly. And in part 3, we are going into the most practical part of this teaching. How do you actually change your inner conversations? What do you say to yourself? What should you imagine? What should you do when circumstances contradict your assumption? And how can you build a mental diet that makes the new identity feel natural? Because knowing the principle is one thing, living it is something else entirely. In the first 2 parts, we discovered something incredibly important. The conversation inside your mind is not just background noise, it can become a rehearsal for how you see yourself, a rehearsal for how you expect people to treat you, a rehearsal for what you believe is possible, and perhaps most importantly, a rehearsal for the future you are preparing yourself to experience. But now comes the question that matters most. How do you actually change the conversation? Because knowing that your inner dialogue matters is one thing, changing it is another. You can watch 100 videos about mindset. You can read every Neville Goddard book. You can understand the law of assumption intellectually. But if you continue having the same private conversations, you continue returning to the same state. And if you keep returning to the same state, you keep strengthening the same identity. So, in this part, we're going to make this practical, not complicated, not mystical, not something that requires you to spend your entire day monitoring your thoughts. We're going to learn how to catch the old conversation, interrupt it, and replace it with a new one. Step 1, catch the conversation. The first step is not changing your thoughts. The first step is noticing them. Most people don't know what they're thinking. They simply react. Something happens, and immediately the mind begins talking. Someone doesn't reply. They don't care. A bill arrives. I'm never going to have enough. Someone succeeds. Of course they did. I'm always behind. You make a mistake. I always ruin everything. The thought appears so quickly that you don't even realize you've accepted it. So, for the next few days, don't try to control everything. Simply observe. When something triggers you, pause. Ask, what am I saying to myself right now? That question alone can change your awareness, your first mental diet. Neville often emphasized the importance of controlling what you allow to dominate consciousness. Think of your mind like a diet. You wouldn't eat one meal and expect it to determine your entire physical health. It's the repeated pattern that matters. The same applies mentally. One negative thought doesn't define you, but if you repeatedly consume fear, anger, resentment, comparison, hopelessness, self-criticism, and limitation, then eventually that becomes your mental environment. Your goal isn't to never experience negativity. Your goal is to stop making negativity your permanent home. The 3-second pause. Here's a simple practice. Something happens. Before reacting, pause for 3 seconds. Ask, what story am I about to tell myself? Because something happened. That's reality. But the story you attach to it is interpretation. Someone doesn't answer your message. Fact. They haven't answered. Story. They don't respect me. Someone gives you criticism. Fact. They gave criticism. Story. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. You experience a setback. Fact. Something didn't work. Story. Nothing ever works for me. Separate the event from the story. That is where your power begins. Step 2. Don't argue with the old thought. This is where many people make a mistake. They hear, I'm going to fail, and immediately start fighting. No, I'm successful. I'm successful. I'm successful. But internally they're terrified. Now there are two voices fighting, the old thought and the forced positive thought. You don't need a mental war. Instead, simply recognize that's the old assumption. Then redirect. You don't have to prove the old thought wrong. You simply stop feeding it. The power of redirection. Imagine you're driving. You realize you've taken the wrong road. What do? You don't stop the car and spend an hour screaming at the road. You turn. That's what changing your inner conversation should feel like. Wrong mental direction? Turn. Fear? Turn. Old story? Turn. Comparison? Turn. Return to the chosen state. Simple. Step 3, choose the new conversation. Now ask, if I already were the person I want to become, what would I naturally say? This question is more powerful than simply asking, what positive affirmation should I use? Because you want language that feels connected to identity. Suppose you want confidence. Instead of, I will become confident someday, try an inner conversation from the identity of confidence. I can handle this. I trust myself. I, I don't need everyone to approve of me. Suppose you want financial stability. Instead of, I hope I become wealthy, your inner conversation might become, I'm learning to handle money wisely. I am becoming financially capable. I expect myself to make better decisions. I notice the difference. You aren't begging, you're becoming. Don't make your affirmations unbelievable. This is another important point. If you currently feel extremely insecure and suddenly repeat, I am the most powerful person on earth, your conscious mind may reject it. Instead, choose something your mind can gradually accept. For example, I am becoming more confident every day. I can learn. I am capable of handling this. I am worthy of being treated well. The goal is to create a new direction, not to create an internal argument. Step 4. Have the conversation after the wish is fulfilled. This is where Neville's teaching becomes especially interesting. Imagine your desire has already happened. Now imagine someone who knows about it speaking to you. What would they say? If your goal is success, I'm proud of you. You finally did it. And you answer, thank you. It feels so natural now. If your goal is a healthy relationship, you two seem so happy together. And you answer, we really are. Now, if your goal is personal transformation, you're completely different now. And you answer, I know, I don't even recognize the old version of myself. You are creating a conversation from the end. Why a short scene can be more powerful. You don't need to imagine an entire future. One short scene can imply everything. Think of a movie. A single scene can tell you what happened before it. Imagine holding the keys to your new home. Imagine hearing, congratulations. Imagine seeing your name on something you wanted. Imagine someone telling you, you finally made it. The scene should imply fulfillment, not the struggle, not the waiting, not the process, the end. Step 5. Change your inner conversation about other people. This may be one of the most difficult practices. Someone has treated you badly. Your mind wants to continue the argument, but ask yourself, who do I want this person to be in my imagination? What? Instead of constantly rehearsing, they don't respect me. Imagine, they respect me. Instead of, they never listen. Imagine, they understand me. Instead of, they always criticize me. Imagine, they appreciate me. This doesn't mean tolerating harmful behavior in real life. It means you stop rehearsing the identity of yourself as permanently mistreated. You change your inner role, the most important person in your inner conversation. And who is the most important person you talk to? You. Think about your internal language. Do you say, I am stupid? I am ugly? I'm behind? I'm a failure? I'm not enough? I'm too late? Would you speak to someone you love that way? Probably not. So why make yourself the one person who receives your worst language? Neville's teachings invite you to reconsider the concept of self. Your relationship with yourself becomes the foundation from which you experience others. Talk to yourself as your future self. Imagine meeting the version of yourself who has already overcome the problem. What would that person say to you? Maybe, relax, you're going to be okay. You don't have to chase everything. You are more capable than you think. Keep going. You don't need to return to the old story. Eh? Now, let that voice become your internal voice. Instead of constantly asking, what if everything goes wrong? What? You begin asking, what would the confident version of me think about this? That changes your perspective. Step 6. Stop rehearsing failure. Many people mentally rehearse disasters all day. What if they reject me? What if I lose money? What if I embarrass myself? What if something goes wrong? Well, they call this preparation, but sometimes it's simply anxiety rehearsing the worst possible outcome. Instead, imagine preparation from a different state. If something unexpected happens, I can handle it. That's much healthier than trying to predict every disaster. You don't need certainty about every external event. You need trust in yourself. The difference between control and trust. Trying to control every thought creates exhaustion. Trust creates space. You don't need to control the entire universe. You don't need to know exactly when something will happen. You don't need to force another person to behave a certain way. You need to choose your state, then act accordingly. This is where Neville's teaching becomes practical rather than obsessive. Step 7. Use your inner conversation before sleep. The period before sleep can become especially valuable. Your body is relaxing, the noise of the day is becoming quieter. This is the perfect moment to stop replaying everything that happened and choose what you want to carry into tomorrow. Lie down, relax, close your eyes, take a few slow breaths, then imagine a short conversation that would naturally happen if your desire were fulfilled. Hear the words, respond internally, feel the relief. Don't force it, don't struggle, let it become natural. A simple night practice. Let's say your desire is to feel secure and successful. Imagine someone you trust saying, "You seem so confident now." Uh, and hear yourself respond, "I finally stopped doubting myself." That's it. Repeat the scene gently. Don't turn it into work. Let yourself experience the reality implied by the conversation, then fall asleep. Step 8. Change your morning conversation. Your inner conversation doesn't begin at night. It begins when you wake up. The first few minutes matter because your mind immediately starts reconstructing your identity. You may wake up and think, "Another stressful day." Instead, pause. Before reaching for your phone, choose a state. Ask, "Who am I today?" Not, "What do I have to do?" but, "Who am I while I do it?" Calm, confident, focused, secure, present. That becomes your mental starting point. The world will test your new state. Eventually, something will happen. Someone will say something. Circumstances will look disappointing. Your old emotions will return. And you'll think, "See, this isn't working." Huh? This is the moment that matters, not when everything looks perfect, but when circumstances challenge your assumption. The old identity will ask for proof. The new identity must learn to remain steady. Don't react to every reflection. Imagine a mirror. You make a change in yourself, but the reflection hasn't instantly updated in the way you expect. You wouldn't panic and say, "The mirror is fighting me." You would understand that the reflection follows. Similarly, don't let every temporary circumstance determine your identity. See it, respond appropriately, but don't turn it into a permanent conclusion. This does not mean ignoring reality. This distinction is essential. If something requires action, take action. If someone is treating you badly, set boundaries. If you have a financial problem, make a financial plan. If you're unhealthy, seek appropriate professional help. Neville's philosophy isn't an excuse to ignore practical reality. The inner conversation is about the state from which you approach reality. Confidence can lead to better decisions. Clarity can lead to better actions. Self respect can lead to better boundaries. A new identity should make you more capable of engaging with life, not less. Step 9. Make the new conversation boring. This may sound strange, but it's powerful. At first, you may be excited. "I'm manifesting. I, I'm changing my reality. Something is happening." Eventually, you want it to become normal. You don't want to spend your entire day thinking about manifestation. You want your new identity to become ordinary. You simply live. You expect. You respond. You move forward. The fulfilled state is often quiet, the real sign of change. The strongest sign that your inner conversation is changing isn't necessarily a coincidence, it is how you respond. Something that once destroyed your confidence doesn't anymore. Something that once triggered you doesn't control you. Something you once chased, you no longer need to chase. You begin thinking, I'm okay. I trust myself. I'll figure this out. I know who I am. That's transformation. You don't need to watch for signs. One of the easiest ways to turn manifestation into anxiety is constantly checking. Is it here? Did I get a sign? Was that coincidence meaningful? When will it happen? That keeps your attention on absence. Instead, focus on the state. Your job is not to stalk the reflection. Your job is to maintain the identity. The 24-hour inner conversation challenge. For the next 24 hours, try something. Don't attempt to control every thought. Instead, whenever you catch yourself saying something limiting about yourself, pause, replace it. If you think, I'm always behind, replace it with, I'm moving forward. If you think, nobody respects me, replace it with, I respect myself and I expect respect. If you think, I can't do this, replace it with, I can learn how to do this. If you think, nothing changes, replace it with, change begins with what I repeatedly accept. Small changes, repeated consistently, the new mental diet. Your mental diet isn't about becoming unrealistically positive. It's about becoming intentional. You don't have to pretend problems don't exist. You simply refuse to turn every problem into an identity. Instead of, this is impossible, ask, what is possible from here? Instead of, I'm stuck, ask, what is the next move? What? Instead of, I'm not enough, say, I am learning to see myself differently. Or your language changes, your state changes, your behavior begins changing. The inner conversation becomes your normal. And eventually, something happens. You stop having to remind yourself. The new conversation starts appearing automatically. You face a challenge. I'll handle it. You meet someone successful. Good for them. My time is coming. You experience rejection. Not every door is mine. You make a mistake. I learn from it. You wake up. I am moving toward the life I choose. The voice inside you has changed. And when the voice changes, the person listening to that voice changes. Part 3. The deepest shift. The ultimate goal isn't to create a perfect mental conversation. It is to become a different person internally. Because eventually, you don't need to constantly say, I am confident. You simply behave like someone who trusts themselves. You don't constantly say, I am worthy. You simply stop accepting what violates your worth. You don't constantly say, I am abundant. You begin making decisions from possibility rather than fear. The conversation becomes identity. Identity becomes behavior. Behavior creates patterns. Patterns influence experience. And your life begins moving in a different direction. Part 3, closing. So, tonight, don't try to control your entire mind. Choose one conversation, just one. Maybe it is the conversation about money, maybe love, maybe success, maybe yourself. Catch the old version, pause, and then ask, what would I say if I already knew I was becoming the person I want to be? Then say that, imagine that, feel that, return to that, again and again, not desperately, naturally, because the goal isn't to force your future into existence. The goal is to stop rehearsing the future you don't want and begin becoming familiar with the future you do. Music slowly rises. But there is still one final question. What happens when your inner conversation changes, but the outside world refuses to change immediately? What do you do when the old circumstances remain? What do you do when someone still treats you the same? What do you do when your bank account still looks the same? What do you do when nothing appears to be happening? That is where most people give up, and that is exactly where the final lesson begins. There is one final test, and it is the test that separates someone who understands a teaching intellectually from someone who actually lives it. You change your inner conversation. You begin thinking differently. You stop rehearsing the old story. You imagine a new version of yourself. You begin to feel different. And then you look outside, and nothing seems to have changed. The same circumstances, the same people, the same problems, the same bank balance, the same unanswered message, the same situation you wanted to escape. And suddenly a voice inside says, see, it isn't working. This is where most people return to the old state. They were confident while imagining, but the moment reality disagreed, they surrendered their assumption. Neville Goddard's deeper lesson was about learning to live from the state you have chosen rather than allowing every external reflection to dictate who you are. And that is what this final part is about. The reflection may lag behind. Imagine looking into a mirror. You change your expression. But for the sake of the analogy, imagine the reflection doesn't immediately update. Would you conclude, I guess changing my expression doesn't work? No. You understand that the reflection is connected to what you're doing. The physical world can sometimes feel similar. You make an internal change, but your external circumstances may not instantly reorganize. This is where patience becomes important. Not passive waiting, not sitting around expecting miracles, but allowing your internal transformation to become stable. Don't let yesterday's evidence become tomorrow's identity. Your current circumstances contain evidence of what has already happened. Your bank balance reflects previous financial events. Your relationships reflect previous interactions. Your career reflects previous decisions. Your habits reflect previous repetitions. Your physical environment contains history. So, if you use today's circumstances as absolute proof of tomorrow, you are allowing the past to determine the future. Neville's philosophy asks you to imagine beyond the evidence, not because evidence doesn't exist, but because evidence represents what has already happened. The question is, what am I going to assume next? The moment your old reality tries to pull you back, imagine you've decided, I am no longer someone who expects rejection. Then someone doesn't respond to you. Immediately, your old identity whispers, there it is again. This is the moment. You can return to, nobody wants me. Or you can say, I don't know what this means, and I don't need to create a negative story around it. Notice the difference. You aren't denying reality. You are refusing to automatically assign it the old meaning. That is mental discipline. You don't need to make everything mean something. This is a powerful lesson for manifestation audiences. Not every event is a sign. Not every delay is a message. Not every coincidence needs interpretation. Sometimes something simply happens. The danger is when you turn every neutral event into evidence against yourself. Someone doesn't reply. They don't care. A plan changes. Nothing works for me. Someone succeeds. I'll never have that. A setback happens. My life is always like this. Stop, breathe, ask, what else could this mean? And sometimes the answer is, it doesn't have to mean anything about me. That is freedom. The new state must survive contradiction. Anyone can feel confident when everything is going well. The real transformation happens when something contradicts your new identity. You say, I trust myself. Then you make a mistake. Can you still trust yourself? You say, I am worthy. Then someone rejects you. Can you still know your worth? You say, I am capable. Then something fails. Can you still believe you can learn? This is where identity becomes real. You are not your latest result. This is one of the most important ideas you can carry with you. A result is information. It is not identity. You failed an exam, that's a result. You lost an opportunity, that's a result. Someone rejected you, that's an event. Your business had a bad month, that's information. None of these things automatically mean I am a failure. The moment you separate result from identity, you become much harder to destroy emotionally. You can learn without collapsing. You can adjust without abandoning yourself. You can continue without desperation. The difference between persistence and obsession. Persistence is often misunderstood. Persistence does not mean checking every hour. It doesn't mean repeating affirmations for 10 hours. It doesn't mean desperately searching for signs. It doesn't mean ignoring practical problems. Persistence means returning to the chosen state. You fall back into doubt, return. You become discouraged, return. You start rehearsing the old conversation, return. You forget who you decided to become, return. That's persistence. The new conversation must become your home. At first, the new inner conversation may feel like a technique. You deliberately say, I'm capable, I'm worthy. Things can change, but eventually it should become your normal mental environment. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to convince yourself every 5 minutes. You simply start thinking differently. Your automatic assumptions begin changing. And when that happens, you know something deeper has shifted. The day you stop checking. There is a fascinating moment in transformation. You stop checking, you stop asking, is it happening? When will it happen? Did that coincidence mean something? Why hasn't it appeared? Well, you simply continue living. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop making the absence of evidence the center of your consciousness. You have chosen a direction. Now you walk, living from the end. Neville's idea of living from the end is not about pretending you physically possess something you don't. It is about mentally occupying the state associated with fulfillment. Ask, if this were already resolved, How would I think? If I already trusted myself, how would I respond? If I already felt secure, what would I stop worrying about? If I already knew I was worthy, what would I no longer tolerate? These questions change the focus. Instead of constantly asking, how do I get there? You begin asking, who am I there? Then you practice being that person now. The power of ordinary moments. You don't have to practice only during meditation. Your entire day becomes practice. You're standing in traffic, you choose patience. You're criticized, you choose self respect. Someone succeeds, you choose inspiration instead of comparison. A problem appears, you choose, I'll handle this. Uh, you're alone at night, you choose a peaceful inner conversation instead of replaying fear. These moments are where identity becomes embodied. Your inner voice should become your ally. Imagine having a friend who followed you everywhere. Every morning they said, you're going to fail. Nobody likes you. You're behind. Uh, You're not enough. Would you want that friend around? Now imagine another voice. Take a breath. You've handled difficult things before. You can learn. You are worthy. You don't have to panic. Keep moving. The Which voice would you rather live with? You don't need fake positivity. You need an inner voice that supports the identity you're choosing. What happens when you slip? You will. There will be moments when the old conversation returns. Maybe you'll spend an hour worrying. Maybe you'll compare yourself. Maybe you'll replay an old argument. Maybe you'll become discouraged. Don't turn the mistake into another negative identity. Don't say, I'm terrible at manifestation. Don't say, I ruined everything. Simply notice, I returned to the old pattern, then return again. The ability to return is more important than never drifting. You don't have to feel good all the time. This is another misconception. You don't have to wake up every day feeling ecstatic. You can be tired, you can be sad, you can have difficult emotions, you can have an imperfect day. Your chosen identity isn't the same thing as constant happiness. Someone who knows they are capable can still have a difficult day. Someone who knows they are worthy can still cry. Someone who trusts themselves can still feel afraid. The difference is the emotion doesn't become the identity when fear appears. Don't ask, how do I get rid of this immediately? Ask, can I experience this without becoming it? Fear can be present, and you can still choose. You can say, I'm afraid right now, but I don't have to make decisions from panic. That's powerful. You are no longer fighting your emotions. You are becoming the person who can hold them without surrendering your identity. The final mental diet. If you remember nothing else from this entire video, remember this. Stop feeding conversations you don't want to live. Stop mentally rehearsing rejection. Stop rehearsing humiliation. Stop rehearsing revenge. Stop rehearsing failure. Stop rehearsing scarcity. Stop rehearsing the worst possible future. You don't have to deny that these things exist. Just stop making them your favorite mental movie. Instead, rehearse peace, rehearse confidence, rehearse fulfillment, rehearse being respected, rehearse solving problems. Rehearse yourself becoming the person you want to be. A powerful night routine. Tonight, before you sleep, try this. Turn off the noise, put your phone away, lie down comfortably, close your eyes, take several slow breaths. Let the day become quieter. Then ask, what conversation would I love to have tomorrow if everything were moving in the direction I desire? Imagine it. Maybe someone says, I'm so happy for you. Or maybe someone says, you seem so different. Maybe everything worked out. Hear the words, then respond. Perhaps, yes, I knew things would work out. Don't force excitement. Feel the quiet relief, the naturalness, the sense that the problem has already been resolved. Stay there for a moment. Then let yourself sleep. Your morning routine. When you wake up tomorrow, don't immediately search for proof. Don't immediately check messages. Don't immediately measure your progress. Take a breath. Ask, who am I today? Then choose. Maybe I am calm, I am capable, I am worthy, I am focused, I am becoming the person I decided to be. Then move into your day. Let the identity guide your actions. Your 7-day inner conversation challenge. For the next 7 days, choose one area, not 10. One, maybe relationships, maybe money, maybe confidence, maybe career, maybe self worth. For 7 days, watch the conversations surrounding that area. Every time the old story appears, catch it, pause, redirect. Don't obsess, don't punish yourself, just return. At night, revise anything that bothered you. Then imagine one short scene implying your desired state. 7 days. That's enough to begin noticing your patterns. The question that can change your life. Before you react to something tomorrow, ask, is this the old me speaking? That question can create a pause, and inside that pause, there is choice. Maybe the old you would panic, but the new you breathes. Maybe the old you would chase, but the new you trusts. Maybe the old you would beg, but the new you knows their worth. Maybe the old you would assume rejection, but the new you refuses to create a story without evidence. That's how identity changes. Not in one giant moment, but through hundreds of small decisions. You are teaching yourself who you are. Every inner conversation is a lesson. When you tell yourself, I can't, you are teaching yourself limitation. When you say, I learn, you are teaching yourself possibility. When you say, nobody wants me, you are teaching yourself rejection. When you say, I am worthy of healthy love, you are teaching yourself worth. When you say, everything is against me, you are teaching yourself helplessness. When you say, I can find a way forward, you are teaching yourself resilience. Your inner voice is your teacher. Choose what you want it to teach. The deepest lesson. Perhaps Neville Goddard's teaching about inner conversations is ultimately not about controlling reality. It is about controlling identification. You don't have to control every event. You don't have to control every person. You don't have to control every thought. You have to become conscious of the state you repeatedly return to, because that state influences how you interpret life, how you behave, what you expect, what you notice, what you tolerate, and what you pursue. Change the state, and you begin changing the person experiencing life. You don't need a new world first. You may be waiting for circumstances to change before allowing yourself to feel different. But consider another possibility. What if you begin differently now? What if you stop saying, I'll be confident when I succeed. And instead, I'll practice confidence while I'm becoming successful. What if you stop saying, I'll feel worthy when someone loves me? And instead, I choose to treat myself as worthy now. What if you stop saying, I'll feel secure when everything is guaranteed? And instead, I can become secure even while life is uncertain. That is internal freedom. The future begins as a conversation. Every future you can imagine begins invisibly. Before the house, there is an idea. Before the business, there is an idea. Before the journey, there is an idea. Before the relationship, there is an idea. Before the transformed version of you, there is an assumption. And before the assumption becomes natural, there is a conversation, a private conversation, a conversation nobody else hears. You say, this is who I am. This is what life is like. This is what people are like. This is what is possible for me. And those statements become the boundaries of your imagination. Change the boundaries, and you change what you allow yourself to become. The final realization. Maybe you have been asking, why isn't my manifestation working? But perhaps the better question is, what am I repeatedly rehearsing when I'm not thinking about manifestation? Because that's where your natural state lives, not in the 10 minutes you spend visualizing, but in the thousands of moments between those 10 minutes. What do you expect? What do you assume? What do you tell yourself? What story do you automatically return to? That is your mental diet, the last conversation. And now imagine something. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the conversation has changed. You don't panic like you used to. You don't chase like you used to. You don't interpret everything as rejection. You don't constantly check for signs. You don't need everyone to validate you. You don't spend every night replaying old arguments. Something inside you has become quieter, stronger, more certain. You simply know who you are. And then someone asks, what changed? And you answer, the conversation inside my head changed first. Final cinematic closing. Music becomes emotional and expansive. Tonight, before you sleep, remember this. There is a version of you that has been rehearsing the past, and there is a version of you waiting to rehearse the future. One says, remember what happened. The other says, imagine what could happen. One says, look at the evidence. The other says, choose the state. One says, this is who you've always been. The other says, you can become someone new. And every day, you decide which voice gets your attention. So tomorrow morning, listen carefully. When the old conversation begins, don't fight it, don't fear it, don't judge it, simply recognize it, and then choose again. Choose the conversation that belongs to the person you are becoming. If you want peace, speak from peace. If you want confidence, think from confidence. If you want love, stop rehearsing rejection. If you want abundance, stop making scarcity your identity. If you want a different life, Begin speaking internally from the person who could naturally live that life. Not desperately, not obsessively, not pretending, but deliberately. Pause, because the most important conversation of your life may be the one nobody else ever hears. And maybe your future isn't waiting for you somewhere far away. Maybe it begins with the next sentence you say to yourself. Long pause. So ask yourself one final question. If my inner conversation became my reality, would I be happy with the life I am rehearsing? If the answer is no, change the conversation. Not tomorrow, not next month, not when circumstances improve. Now, because the old story only continues when you continue telling it. And the moment you stop rehearsing the old identity, you create space for something new, a new assumption, a new state, a new way of seeing yourself, a new way of experiencing life, and eventually, perhaps without even noticing exactly when it happened, the conversation inside you becomes different, and then you become different.